already in our pawnbroker statute. So this would apply to anyone dealing in scrap metal. And I won't go over each thing, but it's pretty much basic information. And they can keep track of it either in a notebook, paper notebook, or electronically. How they keep track of it is up to them. Then in B on page 3, signed statement. So they need to get a signed statement from the person that they're buying from, that it's not stolen property. C, and this is where this becomes the important tool for the police department. They need to make these records available for inspection by law enforcement officers during regular hours or reasonable times. Now D, you'll see that is something that is not in the state statute. This is something that is already required of pawnbrokers. And this is the weekly report to the chief of police on a form provided by the department in any form, or any form acceptable to the police department. You just want to mention these online. That's what's used now.
Currently with pawnbrokers, they use a program called Leads Online. It's a free program, and they enter in all the required data. And I've got a pawn clerk specifically and a pawn detective that work with them. And it's a very easy thing to get online and enter in what's the person's ID and what's been taken. It's a very good research tool, and it's a very good documentation tool that we provide to them.
So they'd be entering everything, and then if you get a report of something stolen, you can usually cross-check it with that.
That's what a large part of what our pawn clerk does, is cross-reference those records.
Mr. Peterson, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this only available online, or could they do it the old-fashioned use of paper and taking whoever to the police department? It's only online.
Currently, it's an online thing. But like I said, it's a free, and most businesses are computerized already. I mean, the world has changed for us.
Yeah, just check. Thanks.
So E, they would have to keep these records for a period of 5 years.
1 second, Mr. Weldon, you?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, is that something that the general public can log in and look at that?
I don't believe so. I believe it's limited. But I don't know the answer for sure, sir.
And then E has an exemption, which basically if a scrap metal dealer is someone, you're dealing with someone on a regular basis, regular business that brings you scrap metal, they wouldn't have to get this information every single time because they've already got it on file, basically what that's saying. So then G on top of page 4 has the penalties. As I said, in the state statute, it was a Class A misdemeanor. And this is something that's happened in various other areas. Seneca Tino from the prosecution section talked about this, but because the question may naturally arise, well, if there's a state statute, why don't the police just make use of that? Why do we need the municipal ordinance? A couple reasons. I think, generally it's been found that if we have our own ordinance, it's much easier for us to enforce it. But one of the reasons is the way it is now with the state statute, the police could cite that, but it's a Class A misdemeanor, and then they would have to get the state prosecution office to prosecute that misdemeanor. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. As a former prosecutor, I can tell you that's probably not going to happen, and we had more money in those days than the state does now. So this is much cleaner, much simpler, and as I said, the goal of this isn't to find ways to write tickets to scrap metal dealers. The goal is to provide this investigative tool, and this simply provides the incentive to do it. It gives the municipality a little more hands-on. Definition section is next in H. Dealer is a scrap metal dealer. Record, just what we talked about. And 3, scrap metal, so that's defined as used, discarded, previously owned brass, copper, bronze, aluminum, lead, stainless steel, catalytic converter material, or other metal. It does not include ferrous metal, so it doesn't include iron, doesn't include any kind of beverage containers. Gold, silver, and platinum will be covered under the precious metals ordinance. That will be the next part of this. Number 4, scrap metal dealer, and this kind of this is an important definition. Person who purchases scrap metal for the purpose of resale or processing. So example, a few years ago, my parents moved on to an old farm in North Dakota and rehabbed the place. They found a bunch of iron. Granted, this doesn't cover iron, but every spring they find more iron laying around. This place was a farm for years and years. They haul it into Grand Forks, they make enough money to buy lunch and pay for gas and feel on top of the world. So, you know, if this is a person who finds some scrap copper on their place, you know, or they're just cleaning out, we probably all have relatives and friends who hoard stuff for years and years. This isn't gonna apply to them because they are not someone who purchases scrap for the purpose of resale or process. So it's not gonna sweep those people up into it. And then transactions are fine. So section 4 deals with precious metal. I won't go through it in the same detail because it's basically word for word. Now, the state does not have a statute on precious metal. They have the one on scrap metal. But again, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. So it tracks pretty much the scrap metal one. You'll see on the next page on 5, on D, again, the reports to the police are there. The penalties under G are the same. You go to the top of page 6 and the definitions. And again, number 4, precious metal dealer, the person who purchases metal for the purpose of resale or processing. So, you know, you want to get rid of some jewelry on Craigslist, fine, you're not covered by this, it's not going to be a burden to you. It's only if you're in the business of reselling precious metal that it would apply. And then section 5, it would just be amending the fine schedule to include the new parts of it. Any questions? We do have a few other things we were going to mention that didn't get included in here, but we thought we would throw out for the committee's consideration. I can go into that, or are there questions so far?
I'd like to hear what they are. Mr. Steele has a question, then we'll.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me a little bit is the reporting numbers in terms of having to do it weekly. Depends on how much business you have, I suppose. Have you had any feedback from folks out in the field? Does anybody have problems with it?
It's a similar reporting requirement to what the pawn shops do, and it's just part of doing business.
Mr. Weldon.
Not so much a question, but, you know, my business at Osco's, we buy used comics and cards and things like that, and we follow the pawn shop laws and we don't report everything. But we get all this information that's here, it's just part of our normal routine, it's not difficult at all, and I could run a report just like that, call for it. So, I mean, just that aspect, I'm curious, it's really simple, very good stuff, and it's important, we've worked with the pawn shop people, but we've got reports in that help build cases in the past, so this is, you know, it's good.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just happened to notice under the fines, you got 10.20.041D, and you got 10.20.042D. Both say the same thing, failure to retain levy for 5 years after transactions. Is there some reason why that's in there twice?
The 042D all refers to the precious metal part of the ordinance, and C refers to the scrap metal. The precious metal part starts on, is section 4 on page 4 of 9.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Don't see any other questions, Todd, if you want to give us the
Okay.
other information.
So, the first thing that, and again, this is just kind of discussion we had, in 10.20.041B, which is page 3 of 9 under the scrap metal one, and again, under precious metals, there's basically the same thing. This would have the signed statement requirement would be for $100 or more, saying it's not stolen. And also in A, going back on page 2, they would need to do this record requirement, the shop would, if it's $100 or more transaction. So the issue was whether to just simply delete the $100 limit. And I'll let Lieutenant Henry make a case for that, or why that might be a good idea.
the folks we deal with on a routine basis know our criminal laws. When there was the recent state change in theft laws, you know, it boosted things up to a felony, we saw that reaction on the street, where they would not steal $499 worth of stuff anymore, they would steal $999 worth of stuff. They're very focused in on that. If we could eliminate that and just say, hey, it's a reporting requirement for precious metals or for the scrap metals that are listed here, I think that would help us.
And for what it's worth, I looked yesterday online, and the price of copper was $2.65 a pound. So it doesn't take, we talked about that, it doesn't take too much, you know, what, maybe 40 pounds, and you're over the $100, so it doesn't take too much.
Just as
In other words, you can sell a lot of copper for under $100 and deprive somebody of something they need. I mean, like one of the guys that testified to the state legislative committee talked about, you know, they had this stuff hauled right out of their contractor yard.
Just as an example of how far they go when the price of copper was up, there was a report where a washing machine was sold at one of these secondhand shops, I won't mention which one, no fault of their own, and then it was returned. They said, well, why do you return a washing machine you buy for $20? And our detective called and says, did you open it up and look inside? They stripped all the copper out of the washing machine, and there's not much copper in there. So they go to great lengths to do this.
Mr. Train?
Just want to thank you guys for doing this, for working on this. We've been asking for this for a while, so thanks for doing it.
Yep.
When I look at all the thefts we have going on in Anchorage, industrial thefts and home thefts, this helps. So thank you guys very much for this.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this relates to the ordinance as a whole, but I'm thinking specifically with removing this $100 requirement. And I think one of my colleagues asked this as well. I mean, have you had any pushback from the dealers? Have they spoken to you and said, if you took out the $100 requirement, I just have to be doing these so often that it would be onerous or burdensome on the businesses? Have you got that feedback at all?
We haven't specifically asked that question, but there's no similar requirement in the pawn statute that I'm aware of.
Okay, so pawn shops, no matter how small the item.
Yes, sir.
And do you know what the frequency is with these businesses? I mean, how many times a day do they get these small, I'm bringing in 20 pounds of copper for some reason?
I have not queried them on that. I'm not aware of that, sir.
Okay, so I guess that kind of gets to a broader question then. I mean, how involved in the crafting of this ordinance was the industry? Was the business that's going to have to be doing this reporting?
As far as I know, they have been, and that's actually one of the purposes in my mind, because in September, we got a few minutes, but depending on kind of the head nods we get from you folks, you know, we'll come back with a revised version of this. In the meantime, it's gotten a lot more publicity, and we talked about this yesterday, that some of the people in Lieutenant Henning's shop, you know, could let folks know this is out there, and because we do want feedback from everybody, anybody who's a stakeholder, obviously, and not have it all wait until it's in front of a full assembly. So, you know, the next meeting this comes up at, hopefully there'll be some people here and they can give us their feedback.
Mr. Trainee and then Mr. Steele?
Just I would like you to make a change in the two areas, otherwise I'll have to build it for. So if you go ahead and do it now, just build it up with taking that $100 requirement out of there.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of people who've been burglarized in this town, I've talked to a lot of contractors who've lost precious metals, copper thrown out the door. I remember it's a place on Martin Luther King, the crime center there, and that was stripped, about $80,000 of copper stripped right out of it before it was even dedicated, so we need to get a handle on this. Thank you guys.
Mr.
Are there
Steele?
any more questions on the $100 aspect? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next one.
I guess I want to ask a couple of quick follow-up, if you don't mind.
It's Mr. Steele and then Mr.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how many people buy used? It's just a,
The last time we checked, when I talked to the detectives, there were 3 for the corner store.
okay, so it's not huge.
No, it's very easy for us to go query them. And the times we've contacted them, very helpful.
They're fine. Good.
The second one we talked about.
One second,
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Dunbar.
So I'm sorry, so Dick, you haven't actually introduced this ordinance yet, right?
I'm not interested in that.
So, I mean,
I'm going to.
I'm trying, yes. But I'd like, before we get to public testimony, and I'm not sure who kind of by process should do this, whether it's one of you or maybe Dick or his assistant, but I really would like somebody to actually call them and ask them about that $100 requirement, have some information from just those 3 brick and mortar stores. Just ask them, how often does this come in the door? How burdensome is this going to be? Because you were talking about $80,000 theft. I mean, that's way over that $100 limit, and that's the whole reason we have the $100 limit, so we go after the $80,000 thefts. And I'd like to know how many of these $30, $40, $50 are coming in every day before we remove that $100 requirement.
Just we can invite them to our next meeting, and they can come here and tell us, quite frankly. We can publicize our next meeting as we're working on this, that's the purpose of this meeting. And they can tell us how it's affecting them.
Well,
Under both scenarios.
They should want to come in and give us input anyway.
I know.
That's what I would think.
I wonder if they even know this is happening.
I'm sure they do.
I'm not sure I know what's happening.
Yeah.
Lieutenant?
Just to clarify, sir, the 3 brick and mortar stores I was referring to was for precious metal.
Oh,
Those are the
okay.
folks that buy the gold and the silver and melt it down and do whatever they will with it.
So how do you feel about scrap?
The scrap metal, I believe that kind of fluctuates. I mean, some of the scrap metal shops I went out and checked on, they were already closed. Anecdotally, I'd say less than half of them that are in the business to do that.
Mr. Walton?
Just, where these dollar amount for the fines? 500 feels high.
It could be, you could set it anywhere you want. I mean, generally, I think they're always under $1,000, but I just kind of picked a number looking at, it may have even come out of something in the pawnbroker license. I honestly can't remember. But I think, the idea is you need enough to make sure that people definitely have reason to comply with the requirement. Like I said, the goal isn't to find anybody, the goal is to have this tool. And so then you kind of weigh, is $100 enough? Maybe not, maybe 300 is enough.
Can I follow up?
Absolutely.
There is a real incentive to follow this anyway, because if you buy something that's stolen, it's not yours. So we track it partly, because I don't want to buy stolen stuff, and it's part of our routine to prevent that. And I would imagine, because I've sold and brought scrap a lot of times for free, and even if you bring it free, they make a record of who you are, and they weigh you, and so they're keeping records anyway.
Yeah.
But it seems like 500 would be high, if they slipped up, 50 would be. I mean, the incentives are high to do this.
How many more items do you have, Ted?
Just a couple more things to mention. One we actually already talked about, and I had put in there, which was the reporting requirement. The third one, this had to do with 30-day hold, which we're talking about doing it for precious metals, not for scrap metal. But if the police, and this is part of the pawn's ordinance, if the police inform someone that item you have showed up on Leads Online or whatever and it's stolen, you need to hold it. And so the question is that something that you want us to add to the precious metals part of this? As I said, the scrap metal part, our feeling was, because you're dealing in much larger volumes, it's probably not practical to say, hold on to that 2 tons of copper or whatever the case. Do you have any, you want to get more on that?
No, I think that stands.
Ted?
And then the fourth one, and I think at least between the 2 of us, we're not pushing this, but we thought we'd throw it out there. Pawnbrokers are actually licensed. They're part of the licensing scheme in the clerk's office. And I haven't talked to our friends in the clerk's office about this either. So, it's a possibility. We don't see it as really doing anything. As I said, the state actually repealed their scrap metal dealer, junk dealer statute, licensing statute. But I just thought I'd mention it because it's part of our internal discussions.
Any last questions for Mr. Sherwood? Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're thinking about eliminating the $100 mark, which would mean that every single person that came in and sold any amount of scrap metal would have to sign one of those forms. Is that the direction we're headed right now?
Well, yeah, and I guess just to distinguish, you know, there's two parts to this, one's scrap metal and one's precious metal. So it could be either, both, neither, but yeah, that's the idea.
All right, thanks.
For what it's worth, I mean, Mr. Straney's name is at the top of this as the person introducing it. I would just allow Mr. Straney to work with Mr. Sherwood and get it the way he wants it, and introduce it, and then we can have a process for everybody being able to weigh in.
So I hand it back in front of us before it comes to the
If
Assembly.
that's what you prefer, absolutely.
I'll work on it with them.
Okay.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks very much. So moving on in our agenda, reports, we still have a couple items after that, so if you could be brief, Mr. Chief Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 5 topics we're going to update you on today. They are graduation and staffing updates, foot patrol, citizen academy, community council survey, and an update on the homicide investigations and also officers allowed. Graduation in numbers. We just graduated 26 officers on December 1st. We started the field training phase this week. On Monday, December 12th, the new lateral officer from Unalaska will start orientation. That brings the total lateral officers to 7 this year. We have 31 officers confirmed for the academy that will start on December 19th. This means that we'll have 413 sworn officers on the books by the end of the year, with 56 of them being in some phase of training. Another thing I'd like to add, on the unsworn side of the house, we had 5 records clerk vacancies, which we hope to fill the first year. We had over 400 applicants for those 5 positions. This means a lot to the department. It shows the department is a very desirable place to work. The municipality is a good place to work, and we're very proud of that. Hope to get some good new employees. Downtown Foot Patrol, started Downtown Foot Patrol.
Excuse me,
on
Chief.
the-
Mr. Straney, did you have a question?
Chief,
Yes, sir.
would you tell us eventually, when you get all these officers there, what departments you're gonna start to rebuild? Because the last administration was stripping our special units out of existence to try and maintain the people in cars. Can you let us know what your program is to restore those units that were gone?
Yes, sir, we will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I was just wondering your impression of the applicants that you're getting. Are you getting quality applicants, or are you having to scrape the bottom of the barrel?
So we're very impressed with the applicants we're getting. We were faced with a real dilemma that we had over a full academy class of 28. We have one individual who was in this past academy class that was injured, and now will be recycled. So we're actually taking on 30 new applicants, new recruits. However, there was just over 40 that were actually qualified, and we could have offered positions to had we been running another academy or academy starting in January. We gave this some great thought, thinking that potentially offer them a position for the June, but this is so competitive, and we do want the very best individuals. So for those that are still interested, come June, there's 10 that have been found to be qualified, we do an updated background to make sure there's nothing that's occurred over the 6 months while they were dormant, and then they would be considered, if they were one of the top 28 or 30 for the junior class, then they'd be offered a position. Otherwise, they might find themselves in the same position. But it's been a long time since we've gotten to a point where we could pick and choose the very best.
Thank you.
For your chief. Mrs. Gray Jackson has joined us and has a question.
Yeah, I thought it was 11:30, but anyway, not a question, but thank you, Chief. And to Mr. Steele's comments, I was one of the 400. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Okay, Chief.
Thank you. And the department was so grateful that so many from the assembly were able to attend the graduation last week. It meant a lot to the department, certainly to those who graduated.
Parking is terrible.
Downtown Foot Patrol. We started our Downtown Foot Patrol on November 28th. 2 officers patrol the downtown area together on foot during their shifts. So far, Foot Patrol has been focused on speaking with business owners, gathering information about problem areas and people, and responding to nearby calls such as trespassing issues and other various crimes. We've had a good response and feedback from citizens about the Foot Patrol so far. I've had an opportunity to go to different functions downtown, and feedback I'm constantly getting is very positive, and we are grateful that the department is in that position to give the community what they want, what they're asking for. Citizens Academy, tonight the last class for the Fall Citizens Academy class graduates, and it graduates next Friday. Starting our spring Citizens Academy class on January 18th. 14-week course is aimed at informing residents on how their department operates, taking a closer look at all our special units and understanding how police respond to crime in our community. We have about 10 open slots remaining, and you can get an application and fill it out from our website. Community Council Survey. We just wrapped up a survey that asked folks within the community council area what kind of community policing they would like to see. We have more than 2,000 responses to the survey, which was distributed by the FCC, Federation of Community Councils. Top responses included having more traffic enforcement in their neighborhoods, more police out in parks and on trails, and regular patrol through their neighborhoods. We will start figuring out how to implement some of these suggestions, and we'll be able to do so with our increased staffing levels. Update on homicide investigation and Officer Salau. Detectives still working on the 3 outstanding homicide cases in which the gun was used as identified as being the same gun in those 5 different incidents. When those cases are closed, APD will issue out a release and say so. To do this, we're working very closely with the DA's office to close these cases out. They have criteria that we're trying to fulfill. Officer Salau is doing well in his recovery, going to lots of physical therapy, and we hope he will be able to return back to APD sooner than later. Thank you.
Seeing Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've got the police on foot out there patrolling the downtown area. Are they working with the ambassadors? There's some communication going on. If the ambassadors find something they think the police need to take a look at?
So we did that prior to the foot patrol. There is good communication between the 2 groups, and it is a collective effort. The foot patrol just expands that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm hearing more and more comments with regards to red light runs specifically. An individual in my district came and showed me the scars where somebody T-boned him on the red light. And I noticed that there is a significant amount. So when and if you get to that particular issue, it might help to just be visible in some regards when you can do it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Training has a comment on that.
Just reference that, I've got a policy working on ordinance, restore automated red light runners. We have to submit to the voters. Because of the last initiative problem, this one has to go to voters to get it approved. But I do have policy working on it.
And they
Because
don't have-
we get numerous complaints of red light runners. You can't have a police officer at every intersection looking at it to ride them. The way the law was changed is you have to have an officer write the ticket. You can't use automated. So what we have to do is, when policy gets to me, I'll introduce it. We'll send it back. We get it approved by the body. We'll send it to voters beyond the ballot. Okay?
So we're talking photo radar?
No, we're talking red light running photo.
Whatever you
It's
want
not
to
a term
call
that's
it.
used.
Yeah.
I know it's-
Automated.
It's not a term of endearment, that's for sure.
Well, neither is people getting
Neither
hit.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So we're getting
Sorry,
clear.
Mr. Chairman.
It's just saying.
But it's up to voters. So,
Sounds like
just let
something
you know
out
I'm
there.
working on it.
Any other questions for Chief Solly? Seeing none. Chief Ross not here. Chief LeBlanc.
A couple
Fire.
updates, yep, thanks. Of course, last night, we had a couple of bonds introduced for public hearing. On the 20th, we've got the 2 replacements to the medic units that we're staffing with temporary employees that we put into service following the spice outbreak, as well as to not only handle the increased transportation, but to prevent the burnout of the paramedics and the EMTs that were staffing those units that were running 18 to 22 calls per shift, which is totally unacceptable. That system, the BLS system, this was the 3rd time it was attempted within the Anchorage Fire Department. It is an overwhelming success, appreciated by the rank and file And we're very much looking forward to the voters approving the permanent replacement of those two MICUs. We continue to work with Girdwood on the absence of state police from basically the Hope cutoff through to Potter's Marsh. That's about a 56-mile of stretch of the highway. Girdwood's fire service area extends about a mile north and south of mile .90 where Girdwood is. Beyond that, that's out of service area. Technically speaking, if you have an accident in that area, Girdwood will probably respond. We may assist, but we'll leave the accident scene as an accident scene. We'll put cones, we'll put flares, and then if that happens at night, that will remain that way until AST responds when they come to work the next morning. So that will be very interesting this summer. Right now, we've only had a couple of minor incidences that haven't resulted in something significant. But working with Chief Day and Girdwood, we're very concerned about a significant MVI with the absence of state police. So we're watchful for that. On the good news, similar to Chief Tolley, we are hiring for 2 dispatcher positions. We had over 168 applicants. 68 actually met the minimum requirements, and those 68 folks will be testing this Saturday for the 2 open positions. So interest in public safety within the municipality of Anchorage is very, very strong, and that's extremely encouraging. Within the department itself, we have, I've got some pictures here, and I'll circulate them, but the bond that was approved a couple of years ago was actually 2014 and 2015, resulted in us being able to purchase 3 new pumpers. And those are being delivered as we speak. And this is following the receipt of the 4 new MICUs that we received in October. 1 went to Chugiak and 3 are here within Anchorage. 2 are already dispersed into the field. The other 2 are still waiting for radio shop configuration. And then probably the most fun is we affectionately call this the Kramer Mobile. This is the first tractor-driven apparatus that Anchorage will have. It's called a tiller. And you'll recall if you watch Seinfeld, there's a little booth in the back because it's an articulating unit, and it's over 60 feet long, and it's meant to be able to take very, very tight corners effectively. And over the past numbers of years, and in a lot of our neighborhoods, the good news is we installed traffic calming bulbs where they build the intersection out so you don't have a square 90-degree turn. Our existing 5 ladder trucks can't make a lot of turns in the city now. So good news, traffic calming. Bad news is bad for the fire department. This tiller can basically spin on a dime. We won't be operating it until the spring because it's technically a challenge for the person in the rear to learn how to keep that straight and in concert with the driver. So the manufacturer will actually bring people up, we'll staff it with another engineer, and we don't want to train during the winter months when there's ice and snow. So we're actually going to park the apparatus in one of the bays at Station 1 and then do the training as soon as the ice snow goes.
Mr. Steele.
Where will it be housed? Where will
Station 1. It will replace.
Permanently, I mean, that's where you'll keep it?
Yes, it will replace old Station 1, ladder truck 1,
Okay.
which will go into reserve. Probably ladder truck 1 will go to replace ladder 5, which we've been having a lot of mechanical problems with. So
Seemed to me to be useful on the hillside, some of those type turns up there.
it'd probably take it 30 minutes to get up there.
I know it.
Mr. Train.
Thank you.
Winter driving with that, I said you're not going to use it now this year, but how is it normal winters, or if there is a normal winter? Can it work?
Yes, sir. It will be fine. It's just that there's a skill to driving the rear part of the apparatus, and we have to train 63 individuals who are engineers to be able to operate that apparatus. And so that we just elected to defer it over the winter months. But once they're trained, then it'll be fine.
Thank you.
Just a couple of other things. As you may know, that over the past 3 years, we've been negotiating with different providers for medical physicals for our 56-hour frontline first responders. We did strike a new contract with Denali Occupational Health this past fall. They are going through, they have a mobile trailer, so they've been going to each station. Of course, we have 3 shifts at each station. It's taking them a while to redo the physicals for all of our employees to the standard that we expect. And then once the individual first responder has been cleared medically, then they'll go through the physical performance assessment, which gauges their ability to do 8 to 10 different evolutions within a fixed period of time. If individuals can't pass the minimum time requirements, then we have almost a rehab period where they get to train and practice with peer fitness trainers so that they can get to the point of being able to pass the physical fitness test. So we're really encouraged about that. Denali Occupational is doing a great job. And lastly, of course, Anchorage is an island unto itself. We have very few people that we can reach out to for mutual aid, but we do have, of course, J-Bear, we do have Ted Stevens International, and we've been working with both of their fire departments to renew the mutual aid agreement that we have with those 2 groups. We're also doing that with the State of Alaska Division of Forestry, especially following the 2 significant forest fire events that we had this summer, the one out at Eagle River, well, really 3, the one at the Permit Center, and then the one, of course, at McHugh Creek. Beyond that, everything is going well.
Thanks, Chief. Director Freeman.
Well, thank you. I want to give you updates on 3 areas. One is, of course, last night, the Assembly passed our continued efforts to educate our community on marijuana, and we appreciate that. We will continue to post those educational, that information. Primarily it's on media, Facebook, Twitter, and television. And we'll get you the details of that, which were requested last night. I hope to have that to you by the end of today. We are also in the final processes of having the translation of 5 languages for our human trafficking posters. You passed the ordinance to be able to post those notifications for various types of businesses in Anchorage, and we are waiting for the final translation of the poster. So I think we have it in 5 languages, and the 5 most commonly used languages in Anchorage. So we'll provide you with that information once it's finished, and then we will distribute those to the appropriate businesses in Anchorage that are required to post those. In addition to that, we've been very actively working when our temperatures dipped this last week. There was a great concern about the public safety of our chronically homeless individuals. We had an increase in the utilization of the cold weather shelters, which are provided. These are faith-based organizations that provide shelter in addition to individual chronically homeless folks to families, so that people are not staying in their cars or in camps. We, the fire marshal, thank you, Chief, approved an increase in capacity at the downtown soup kitchen from 30 individuals for the overflow to 50. And so they are safe fire-wise as well as temperatures. We have a warming shelter, if you will, at the Stoltz building. It used to be Crossover House, managed by Anchorage Community Mental Health Services, and that is now staffed, as well as having overflow in Beans Cafe again. We'd had a challenge with that last year, and so they are now able to receive overflow, so that we hope to prevent anyone being in parking lots, on streets, and homeless camps during these cold temperatures. And those have been, we are not at capacity right now at Brother Francis, which surprised us, but hopefully all this permanent housing is working. But the challenge we had last week was transportation, getting people to the overflow places, but that was resolved too. So thank you for your efforts in supporting those.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melinda, so I know how many people were in the shelter and the additional churches and other people who took in, homeless people when it was like 15 below the other night, or 12, or whatever the official temperature was?
Right.
You know, how many that we had?
I don't know how many the churches, they do a bed count so that we have that every year, exactly how many. I can certainly get that to you, that information from last week. And I know that we did not, I think, need the overflow at Brother Francis. They hadn't reached an overflow capacity, but we were able to move the additional women to the downtown soup kitchen.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Train?
Received a notification recently that there was a license for an animal license requested in Dartmouth. I met with the hearing officer and they rejected the limitation on, the people were told they could have their license regardless of what the neighbors thought. The neighbors had to take it to court, Superior Court. I know they came to our ombudsman. And I think they filed a complaint with you. And you said what, because it went to the hearing officer, you can't do anything about it now?
Well, the Animal Care and Control responded to the constituents who filed the complaints. They issued 4 notices of potential violation. And the licensee appealed that to the administrative hearing officer, who found that there was a procedural error by Animal Care and Control, and he or she found in favor of the appellant.
And they have to issue a license.
The notices of violation were dismissed, and the license, and the hearing officer said the license had to be renewed. So, but there's also a provision now that if they receive any sustained violations in the next year for this license, the license will be revoked.
My concern lies with us now telling the individual, the individual around it, if they don't like this, they've got to go to Superior Court themselves to deal with this. So we need to figure out what the problem was with those violations, how we make sure that this problem doesn't happen again.
Yes, I will definitely be looking into that. What technical error was made, perhaps more than one time, in the response to the complaint.
Thank you. It's on Dartmouth Street.
Okay. I will definitely look into that.
Thanks. I don't see Rob here, or is anybody from Office of Emergency Management? Okay. Moving on to new business. We've had a request from Mr. McLeod, Brown Bag Sandwich Company, to kind of update us on the efforts he's making with his business. Mr. McLeod?
Hand out.
Alright, so just a quick introduction again. I'm Corinne, this is Antoine, Brown Bag Sandwich Company. We just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you, first of all, for having us. Really, this is just kind of an informal thing. Our goal today is to present and receive input on something. It's a concept, it's in its early stages, something that we're calling the Downtown Safety Coalition. So feel free to bounce off ideas, ask questions, provide advice, anything that you guys think would be helpful. The goal here really is just to be proactive moving forward and create a safer environment downtown.
And I'll be the first to admit that this is definitely a unique concept. My wife and I have had our business downtown for a little over 5 years now. We've worked and lived downtown for longer than that. And I think that initially with our new business venture into the bar industry, going into it, I think we were a little naive in thinking that we could just focus on what's happening inside of our business and worrying about not getting violations, and that would be enough. During our initial assembly hearing for our liquor license, Mr. Whittleton had a great comment that's actually stuck with me ever since then. He described his situation at his old office that was across the street from Chill Coops, and how basically Coops would have their security control, not just their property, but they would kind of walk around and make sure that everything was good. So that really stuck out to me, and moving forward, we do want to be proactive. We see that there is a real need for some more safety changes to occur downtown. I think that first and foremost, the foot patrol that's been going on by APD has been a huge step in the right direction. I think that getting more cabs downtown would also be another huge step in the right direction. I think that possibly this could be another step in the right direction as well. So the Downtown Safety Coalition will be an organization dedicated to helping make downtown Anchorage safer for residents and tourists, and more profitable for business owners by creating a positive environment. I think that recently there's been a lot of negative perceptions about nightlife downtown. I know that we've experienced that ourselves with our business. We're hoping that we could kind of curb that and hopefully change the perception downtown to being an inviting, safer place where people want to come and spend money and help business. With a focus on the hospitality industry and safety solutions, the DSE will serve as additional eyes and ears in the downtown area while aiming to create a professional relationship with local law enforcement, social service agencies, business owners, and other entities.
So basically our goal here is similar to the Downtown Partnership. During the day they have their ambassadors, and that's a huge help. I mean, we see them all the time during the day. They're all over the place. And that's very beneficial. It makes me feel a lot safer. I mean, we're downtown all the time. I've got my kids. It makes me feel a lot better. However, at night, we don't have that same amount of presence. And so we're basically looking to fill that void and create additional eyes and ears, as Anthony said.
Yeah, and like I said, the foot patrol it's been great, but it is 2 officers patrolling a relatively large area. I think that the more eyes and ears that you can have on the ground would really just help. The safety issues that are concerning nightlife, I don't think they're any surprise to anybody here. There's unsafe conditions for late night employees and patrons. I think that what often gets overlooked are the nighttime employees when they get off work. A lot of us, when we get out of there, it's 3 or 4 in the morning. My staff, they might be walking to their cars with $300 or $400 in cash in their pockets, and they're dressing all back. They look like industry people, and they've been getting targeted as of late. I think my wife can attest to when she was a bartender at F Street.
Yeah.
That was a big time issue, and that was I think over 5 years ago.
It was, yeah. I mean, it's always going to be an issue. And I mean, beyond even just the attire, it's fairly evident, especially when you're walking by yourself. You're not in a party mode. You're walking to your car oftentimes. My shift started at 5 when I worked at F Street. There was no parking to be found. So oftentimes I would have to park a fair distance away. Not everybody is leaving the establishment all going in the same direction. Try to look out for each other as best you can, but it's a difficult thing, especially with me being a young woman having a bunch of cash in my pocket. It's unsettling.
And I included some testimony on the second page here, but when talking to a lot of people in the industry downtown, this is a real concern. When they get off work, some of them are having to park 4 or 5 blocks away, maybe in the parking garage, and it's scary having to walk late night with all that money on you, and really you're a walking target. So that's one of the main issues that we hope to address. I'll elaborate on that here in a little bit. Public inebriation and drug use. I think that we're all aware of that. I think the Foot Patrol, they're doing a good job in trying to help curb that. Once again, I think that more eyes and ears, being able to contact the public safety people to bring their vans and pick them up would help them get off the streets a little bit faster. People drinking alcohol in their vehicles and on sidewalks before they go into the bars and restaurants. That's another problem. Once again, my wife just had an experience not too long ago with a group of people that were drinking in a parking lot.
Well, they were just down from us, and oftentimes we'll find bottles and it casts a bad light on our establishment. So I, from a distance, approached them and didn't go very amicably. So, it's something that we're looking to address, but also do it in a safe way. We don't want to put our employees at risk. As we've mentioned before, that security guards are only insured on our licensed premises. And should something happen to them, they could be sued, we could be sued. Should they be injured, they're not covered by workman's comp. So just having somebody who's able to identify a lot of these problems and report it to the authorities who luckily are in the vicinity at the same time, that's really our goal here.
And then obviously, bar breakers, it's been what it's done. Once again, I think it would be nice if there was more of a presence, especially at bar break. I think if you speak to every bar owner, we would love it if we had a patrol car just right outside of our establishments at bar break, but that's really not feasible right now, and we understand that. So we hope to address that in a number of ways. One of those ways is to provide safe rides to late-night employees and customers via vehicles for hire and pedicabs in the downtown area in a very specific location. I'm not sure if many of you are aware of the whole vehicle for hire thing. I brought it up last night at the assembly, and speaking with people at the Department of Transportation, it was kind of laid out for something like this. It's It's different from a taxi cab. It doesn't require a taxi cab permit. It still requires a chauffeur permit, so you have to do the drug testing, the background test. Cars have to be inspected. But essentially, what's different with a vehicle for hire is that it serves a specific purpose. In this case, it would be just on Friday, Saturday nights, and just for downtown patrons. Once again, I think if the ordinance does pass, we would get more taxi cabs. That would help as well. But still, one of our biggest problems has always been, how do we get people home safely? For instance, on Halloween, at closure, we had a crowd of people outside, and it's a tough situation. You've got girls in skirts and costumes, and it's freezing out. It's an issue, and this could also help address the whole getting off work, I don't want to walk to my car thing. Because right now, as it stands, and I hear from a lot of people that work in the industry, they get off work and say they want to call a cab. Maybe they work at that Captain Cook and they park at the JCPenney parking garage. A lot of cab drivers don't want that short fare. It's not worth their time. They want that long fare going out to Hillside, going to Muldoon. So oftentimes they're just kind of left to figure it out on their own. I think that this could be really beneficial for those service people getting off work that just need to go a short distance, and we would be willing to provide that. Another way that we hope to help address a lot of these issues is to have late night safety ambassadors. Like my wife said, the Downtown Partnership does a great job during the day. I'm not sure if they plan on doing it at night. That would be great. But I think that having more of a presence would be a benefit to the police department, to the Anchorage Safety Patrol, and really to the citizens of Anchorage. Bottom line, I think at the end of the day, my wife and I were just tired of complaining, and we wanted to be proactive and positive about this. And it's been a big time learning experience throughout this whole process, but we're excited about this project. We hope to get some feedback. If you have any questions or anything of that nature, please let us know. I did have a question for Chief Tolley. If this was something that we were to roll out, I'm not sure how the ambassadors work, with the downtown ambassadors work with the police department. Do they typically just call dispatch if they see something, or is there some other way of communication?
Mr. Chair, so police department encourages any type of suspicious activity or any type of violation to contact the police department directly so that we can assess if there's emergency services that need to be performed.
Okay.
With that being said, we do work with others in the community to try to resolve things in the most efficient way.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's what we're looking for, just the most
We want to
efficient
always report
process.
to the police by going online, by transmitting through social media, things like that. A lot of times we're not looking at that monitoring. We don't really have anything in place to do that. So it's very important to notify the police and then let them make the assessment of how to best handle the phone.
Thank you.
We have Ms. Gray Jackson, Ms. Welton, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say for both of you, it's refreshing to see young entrepreneurs realizing that public safety is not just an issue for police, but it's a community-wide issue, and I just appreciate you being as proactive as you are, and I want to congratulate you for your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm flattered that you took my lecture in politics. Your old son, it doesn't happen all the time.
They'll get there.
I guess I assume the Downtown Partnership already did this, but they don't. Can you fold this program into theirs so you have?
I would like to, not to go into too much detail. We're not having a good working relationship right now with the Downtown Partnership, which actually kind of led us to this. Down the road, I would love to have a professional relationship with them. Hopefully, we can cooperate and work on this together.
Mr. Dunbar, then Mr. Skip.
Thank you. So, Chief, I kind of wanted to follow up on their question, and I guess it's also gets to my own lack of understanding of the new foot patrols downtown. Are they going through the night, or is it only during the day? Do we have officers assigned extra officers perhaps, assigned downtown around bar breaks, say Friday and Saturday night? And then if I could kind of restate, I think what they were asking was, rather than call dispatch, is there any way for them to call directly to the officers that are downtown? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Somewhat, yeah.
So, yeah.
So through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, yes, we cover all three shifts. So there's two officers working in pairs, mids, swings, a day. Also, your second question, depending on day of the week, day of the always monitoring bar break. And there is concentrated effort, not just from our enforcement or patrol unit, but also we have specialized units such as our DUI unit, traffic enforcement unit, our K-9 unit. We try to strategically set up the hours that these individuals work and so on, so that they can supplement and help in those areas. However, you have to take into consideration too, one or two major calls coming out, that could then divert those assets to handle those immediate situations that have been reported to the police, instead of an officer initiating type of investigation. But if anybody's not handling a call, and so on, there is a real effort to provide additional safety where that safety is needed throughout the city, and often that is downtown.
So, but do we have officers that, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'd like to hear you articulate it. So, do we have officers that are assigned to the downtown zone or you know, and are here repeatedly, week after week, month after month, to build the relationships with people like the Clouds?
Eventually, we hope to get to that point. Right now, they are moving all over, handling calls. They do have areas of responsibility, but if they're busy handling them, the next person over is going to come in and handle it, and so on and so forth. And that is mostly to reduce response time and so on. So, for example, we don't want a full unit from Eagle River or for South Anchorage to come to downtown unless all the northern district downtown units are tied up doing something. And then quite often, if a person in the warrant group or a person in the CAP unit, the track unit, they will handle all their calls because they are in the area and they'll make themselves available. As far as reporting things, you must call dispatch and report a call to that for a number of reasons. We have to determine the priority of the call, and it's impractical to contact an officer directly. Now, if you're out on the street and run into an officer, and the officer's visibly, all of them will talk to you unless they can't, because they have to break and go handle something with a higher priority and so on. And that's a challenge that officers face every day. But there is no way to directly contact them. The other important thing is we want our officers to have as much information as they can. We do track numbers of calls, call history, who we're dealing with, for safety of the officer in the community, and providing the best service.
Very quickly, Mr. Steele, Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, very quickly. I agree with the statement about it would be good if it was a district-wide visibility for the bar owners to downtown partnership or something like that, such that there can be good cooperation between folks and good visibility. I think that's important. I think it's also important for ABD in terms of visibility. So I hope they are, even though it's cold as heck, out walking around, out visible, especially. I have two 27 or 20-something kids, and they stay away from downtown for the most part. They go to Midtown or somewhere like that, and it would be nice to get a reputation of safety.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when the mid shift is over, is there an overlap when the next shift starts? And isn't that right around bar break time?
So through the chair, Mr. Peterson, yes, there is some overlap in each of these shifts by about 2 hours where you have double assets available, as well as I mentioned specialized units such as our intoxicated driving unit. We put those at key hours of bar break and so on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was still happening. And one other quick question, and I apologize for bringing this word back up, but we talked a little bit about taxi cabs last night.
And we go next time, 20.
I think you will. But, and I believe McCullough's mentioned this last night, that, or someone did, that at one point in the past, they were trying to set up a street on 4th Avenue where cabs could queue up for bar break. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. And I'm just wondering, logistically, how can we go about doing that? I mean, just.
Yeah, the concept of cab stands, I mean, would talk to Mr. Musser. It's been debated, and he knows the ins and outs of it. I think he can inform me about where it's
Talked to
at.
Mike Abbott last night, and he was saying, yeah, but it can't be just the municipality. The individual businesses can also set up a stand and have a place where something can be to, where cabs could fuel. That's not just a municipal issue.
Mr. Chair, the police department could be of any assistance on that, such as our CAP unit, assessing the best practices and things, and provide some guidance on if that would help or hurt other things such as traffic flow, displacement of people, things like that. We'd be more than happy to contribute to anything you'd like to consider.
Sure. Is there anybody in the police department as a liaison that the McLeods could perhaps contact with their ideas about this, that they would, it's.
So I strongly urge them to contact the Federation of Community Councils, and because one community council, Solon, has the same interests as the next quite often, and I know it's not the traditional community council, but I'm sure they would be of interest. But within the police department would be our community relations unit, and that's Lieutenant Denise Rollins.
Senior President, thank you very much for coming forward. I understand, the neighborhood pressure you're under. I think it's very wise to take these proactive steps. I think that's smart. With the issue of the vehicle for hire permits, I think it is a good idea to pursue. There is pushback on those from the taxi industry as well. But if you do want to pursue that further through the Transportation Commission and are having any problems, let us know and we'll try to help you with that. But thank you for being here. Okay, last but certainly not least, we have a report, a similar topic on the bar safety hour. And Mandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a report that the clerk's office prepares quarterly for the assembly. This one will be on the agenda on December 20th. The clerk's office wanted to point out three things to the committee. First, we wanted to highlight the three establishments that have expired. They applied in 2015 and since have allowed their permits to lapse. So now these establishments must return to closing hours between 2:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, and 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Saturday, Sunday, and legal holidays. The police department and code enforcement was also notified about this. So two establishments have been timely and consistent with their renewals since 2013, and those are the top two that are listed under the 2013 through 16. So in preparing the quarterly reports to the Assembly, the clerk's office requests notice of violations from the ABC board, and we also consult with APD getting the calls for service during the bar safety hour. I also asked for it the subsequent hour, so it's from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. that I was looking at. So this information's reviewed, and it was done for all 5 establishments because during this reporting period, all 5 of them had valid permits at some point during this reporting period. So the second thing that the clerk's office wanted to point out is that as code requires, we do provide these quarterly permits. And in the last few quarterly permits quarterly reports that we've submitted, we've done additional review on the holders of the permits. We've seen an increase in calls for service to specific addresses, and we acknowledge that not all calls for service are specifically related to this establishment. They're based off of addresses, but it does appear that there are 2 big issues that came about from our review, and it's an increase in calls for service over time for all of the permitted establishments. And one establishment in particular had substantially more calls for service. So we don't put all of this detailed information on the quarterly reports, But we can provide the information, and if the committee would like, we can assist with any further review.
Mr. Train?
Mandy, would you check with the ABC board and find out in the last year how many notice of violations it issued? Because I've been receiving rumors that the state's been cutting back on the amount of money they've got going to the alcohol control board, and in fact not doing stings anymore. And we said on the renewals we'd see a bunch of notice violations. That's dropped down, and I hope things have gotten better, but I doubt it seriously. The state's not pursuing this. So if you get a hold of them.
I can tell you there have not been any notices of violation that were provided from the ABC board for these.
Okay, just add across the board, I'd like to know if the state has cut back on doing that, or it's just luck of the draw. We're not seeing anything.
Mr. Dunbar?
So I guess I have two questions. The first is, maybe I'm confused, but it sounded, the way you phrased it, it sounded to me like you were saying that the applicants, the ones who took this bar safety hour, had an increased number of violations. Was that what you were saying, or no?
We saw over the past few quarterly reports that have been submitted, about the last 4 or 5, that there's been an increase over time from those quarterly reports in all of them.
Within this group, not
Correct.
comparing this group to people that
Correct.
don't take this. That's not what we're saying.
Correct.
Okay, because you don't get those reports from those who aren't involved in this.
Right.
And I guess my second question is, and this is bringing up a conversation we had earlier in the summer, but so now we only have two bars that are participating in this, and potentially, do you think some of these 3 will, once they've expired, is there any indication that they are going to come back? And they just sort of forgot about it, or are they just done with the program?
They are sent notices when their permits are pending expiration. So they're sent notice that within a month it will expire, and that they need to renew.
And so that hasn't.
They have not. They.
And you notified them that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So they've received multiple notices from the clerk's office.
Okay, and we haven't got any indication that they are going to. So then my follow-up question to that, and it's for you as sort of administrators of the program, but also I think Sylvia is here. I'd love to hear why are, of all the bars downtown, why are only 2 of them using this program? And what could we change to make, if we think it's valuable, do we want people using this program or not? So I guess first, just kind of explain why nobody uses this program, or very few bars use this program.
I'm not the expert in this area, but I think there's basically no reason for them to do so. It's basically, they have to maintain staff and have people there while they're basically closed and not necessarily making any money. There's a lack of incentive for them to provide. I mean, I guess it may be a community good, but most of these places aren't in business necessarily community good. So I think there's just really no incentive for them to stay open but not make money.
Sylvia, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would like to know who they are, those 3, if possible. I'm sure it's overlooked because, to my understanding, the 5 that were participating, they do want to stay in the program. That was my understanding from them last week. Actually, I just sent a survey in regards to the Off the Road program. You know, that's a program that we provide. They had a lot of feedback about, after hours, people waiting for their taxi cab rides. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I will definitely follow up, with them. And I'm sure they'll renew their permits. And it's something that they need to do all the time, so I will definitely have a talk with them about it. They can do it. I mean, I don't know what their specific issue would be, but I will find out.
Person, you have any feedback on that?
Well, I just wonder if perhaps the lack of understanding, and I think a lot of the focus is the downtown area, and this does apply to the full city, the full municipality. So I plan on doing outreach with the whole municipality, information education, to let them know that it's not just a downtown program,
Steele?
There are areas elsewhere in the city too that could take advantage of this. It seems to me places like Taproot, folks that do the same thing in terms of close up and put the out on the streets. So, it may be something that there ought to be incentives to.
I think the program is available to anybody in the city, isn't it? Is it just limited to downtown?
And also, as folks in the back mentioned, if restaurants, or if they have, if they serve food, they probably have the restaurant designation permit, and then they're qualified to be open 24 hours if they wanted, so.
Yeah, so this specifically relates to the beverage dispensary licenses where it's only alcohol, it's a bar, there's no food.
And if I can point out, Red Burgers, they do have a restaurant designation. So, they do have a food service kitchen and do catering out of there. They serve food at night during catering that, services the kitchen. So that's probably one of the reasons why they have not. And I just saw that here. That they have not.
I can look into the license type that they have. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head.
Well, you sufficiently teased us with the information about the heightened activity, so I would like to see more of the details on that so we have a better understanding of what you're seeing there, and we can work on any follow-up steps that seem warranted. Any other questions? Any member comments? Any topic, Elizabeth?
I need one more announcement. We are in the process of finalizing a new contractor for the Intersafety Patrol and Safety Center. Gold Belt Securities did not choose to continue on with that option. And so we had our ITB process open, and we had several applicants, and now we're in the process of finalizing a contract with a new contractor. So we expect that transition to go smoothly. It happens New Year's Eve. It would be interesting. And Mark Lassard, our contract manager and program manager for DHHS that oversees that program, has done a remarkably outstanding job, as well as our procurement officer who has attended today's meeting, Tim Butler. So you will be seeing that information come forward in the very near future.
Mr. Traney and Ms. Jackson.
Do you anticipate needing to come forward to us for additional funds to cover the change and the new individual taking over?
I hope not. We have made a great deal of effort to try to contain the services and the current level of service delivery at the current budget.
Let us know as soon as you find out for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson and Mr. Steele.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask the same question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear about the safety patrol with the reduction in the spice issue. Maybe it would be good to have them back on the street, and they wouldn't have pressure that they have.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Any audience comments, questions, political rants? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.